My name is Emily Hart. I'm 30 years old, and for a long time, I believed I was living the life people envied. My husband Ryan and I had just gotten married 8 months ago after being together since college. We both had successful careers. He worked in real estate development, and I managed brand partnerships for a tech startup. We were the couple who seemed to have it all figured out. The crowning moment was when we bought our first home, a beautiful, light-filled place in the suburbs with high ceilings and a sprawling backyard I always imagined filling with children one day. But it wasn't just any house to me. It was bought, almost entirely, with money my grandmother left me when she passed away last year. She and I were close in a way that felt different from the rest of my family. When I was little, she'd tell me, "Emily, one day you'll build something no one can take away from you." Those words stayed in my heart. So when she left me $500,000 in her will, it felt like both a gift and a responsibility. When Ryan and I signed the mortgage papers, he placed his hand over mine and said, "This house is ours forever." I wanted to believe him so badly I never looked closer at the details. In my mind, marriage meant trust. Because we were both working so much, often 12-hour days, I suggested hiring a part-time maid to keep the place clean. Ryan didn't argue. In fact, he seemed almost too agreeable about it, saying he knew how much I hated clutter. So I contacted a cleaning agency and arranged for a woman named Lucia to come 3 days a week. She was in her mid-20s, with dark hair she wore tucked into a neat bun. She was soft-spoken and polite, and she kept everything spotless. I felt relieved knowing someone was taking care of the house while I was at meetings or business dinners. The first few months passed in a blur of work and trying to settle into married life. We hosted a small housewarming with our families, and everyone kept commenting on how lucky we were, how beautiful the house was, how happy we looked. And we did look happy. But in retrospect, I see now how I was too busy to notice the small things. Like how Ryan started leaving for client meetings late in the afternoon when Lucia was scheduled to arrive, or how he would brush off my questions about paperwork, telling me, "Don't stress about it, I'll handle the boring stuff." One evening in early spring, I came home exhausted after a long day and found Ryan in the living room alone. He stood up, startled, as if he wasn't expecting me so early. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was just checking some mail Lucia had set aside. It seemed harmless. I wanted to believe it was harmless. Looking back, I can't decide whether I was naive or simply desperate to hold on to the idea that I had built something perfect. I told myself that everything was fine, that marriage just felt strange sometimes because it was new. I closed the front door quietly behind me, almost tiptoeing across the foyer so I wouldn't startle anyone if Lucia happened to be cleaning. My heels clicked faintly on the tile as I moved toward the dining room. All I was thinking about was my laptop, a bright blue case, sitting exactly where I'd left it beside my coffee mug. I was rehearsing my excuses for being late to my morning meeting, until I heard voices drifting in from the kitchen. I paused, confused. One of the voices was Ryan's, low and coaxing. The other was Lucia's, soft but tinged with nervousness. At first I thought maybe he was just giving her instructions about chores, but then I heard my name. "She won't suspect anything, Lucia. Emily's never here during the day," Ryan said, his tone disturbingly calm. "We'll get her signature one way or another. Once it's filed, it's too late for her to contest it." My heart began to pound in my ears. I took a single step closer, careful not to let the floor creak, and pressed my shoulder against the wall near the kitchen doorway. My breath caught in my throat. "I don't know," Lucia whispered. "I thought you said she already signed it." "She signed some of it," Ryan replied impatiently. "But the quitclaim deed needs her signature, and then I can move the house fully into my name. We've been over this. Once that's done, we split the payout when I refinance. You get your share, and I get mine." I felt the air leave my lungs. Quitclaim deed, refinancing, splitting the payout. I had worked 12-hour days for years to build my savings, to honor my grandmother's memory, to have a home that would belong to me and my future children. And my husband was standing 20 feet away, plotting to steal it. My fingers were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped my phone as I opened the camera app. I pressed record and held it close to my chest, catching the audio even if I couldn't see their faces. "I can't do this," Lucia said, her voice cracking. "It's too risky." "It's not risky if you keep your mouth shut," Ryan snapped. "She trusts you. She thinks you're just the help. She'll sign whatever you put in front of her if you look nervous enough." I felt sick. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might vomit. All those nights I'd sat across from Ryan at dinner, telling him how grateful I was that he took care of the bills and the paperwork. All those moments I'd believed he was a partner, not a predator. Lucia sniffled. "I thought you loved me." There was a pause, a long silence that made my skin crawl. "You know I care about you," Ryan finally said in that same smooth voice he used on me when he was lying. "But this isn't about feelings. It's about freedom. She's going to find out sooner or later, but by then, it won't matter. The money will be ours." I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. I could feel my pulse throbbing under my fingertips. My entire body was trembling. Freedom. That was what he called stealing everything I had. I replayed my grandmother's voice in my mind, the way she'd always insisted I learn to protect myself, to read every contract. And yet I hadn't. I'd signed whatever Ryan put in front of me because I believed love meant trust. I didn't remember walking back toward the dining room, but I did. My hand brushed the edge of the table as I steadied myself, the laptop suddenly the least important thing in the world. I knew if I walked in there right now I might do something reckless. Scream, throw something, collapse. But I couldn't pretend I hadn't heard them. Slowly, I drew in a ragged breath and pressed stop recording. The proof was in my hand. The truth was a knife in my chest. I took another step forward, willing my voice to be steady, though my throat felt raw. "Ryan," I called, my tone deceptively calm. The kitchen went silent. When I stepped into the doorway, I saw both of them frozen in place. Lucia's eyes went wide, brimming with tears. Ryan's expression flickered. Shock. Then something that looked like calculation. "Emily," he said, as if nothing were wrong. "You're home early." I looked at him, really looked, and felt the last of my illusions crack into pieces. "No," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I'm exactly where I need to be." For a moment, the three of us just stood there, caught in a frozen tableau that felt unreal. Lucia was clutching the hem of her apron like it was a lifeline. Ryan's hand was still resting on the counter, where he had been leaning toward her. I could almost see the wheels turning in his head, trying to decide which story to spin first. I forced myself to take another step into the kitchen. My voice felt like it belonged to someone else when I spoke. "I heard everything," I said quietly, holding up my phone. "Every word you just said." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Emily, you don't understand." "No," I snapped, my voice rising. "Don't even try. I understand perfectly. You've been plotting to steal my inheritance. My grandmother's money." Lucia's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "Save it," I cut in. I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. "Both of you. Just save it." Ryan straightened, and in that moment I saw the man he really was. His eyes hardened, the fake tenderness disappearing. "You're overreacting," he said coldly. "This is just business. You were never interested in any of the financial details. You made that clear when you handed me the paperwork." "You told me you'd handle it because you loved me," I whispered. He shrugged, as if my heartbreak was an inconvenience. I did what I had to do to protect our future. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hurl something across the room. Instead, I forced myself to stay still. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. Don't let them see you fall apart. I glanced at Lucia, who was trembling. You're going to give me everything, I said, my voice low and steady. Every document, every piece of correspondence, every signature you forged or tried to forge. Because if you don't, I will take this recording straight to the police. Ryan's lip curled. You think they'll care? You think anyone will believe you didn't know what you were signing? I think, I said evenly, that this recording proves you conspired to commit fraud. I think the police will be very interested in how you plan to forge a deed to steal a marital asset. He opened his mouth, but for the first time since I walked in, he looked unsure. I felt a surge of cold determination. You have one chance to do this the easy way. You're going to give me everything, and then you're going to get out. Ryan's eyes flicked to Lucia, then back to me. You won't actually call the police, he said, trying for that reassuring tone he used to get his way. You don't want the embarrassment. You don't want your family to know you married someone who… Stop, I hissed, my voice shaking. Do not finish that sentence. I took another step closer and looked him dead in the eye. You are going to pack your things and leave this house by tonight. If you don't, I'll file a restraining order and have you removed. Lucia let out a sob. Emily, I'm sorry. He told me. He said you wouldn't care. That you'd signed it all anyway. Her voice trailed off as she realized how hollow it sounded. I looked at her, feeling something close to pity for how easily she'd been manipulated, and how she'd let herself believe she could steal what wasn't hers. I suggest you find somewhere else to work, I said quietly, because you are finished here. Lucia nodded, her shoulders shaking. Ryan was still watching me, that calculating look flickering behind his eyes. This isn't over, he muttered, almost to himself. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Yes, I said, my voice clear and cold. It is. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. My hands were still trembling, but my mind had never been clearer. I felt like I'd stepped out of some dark dream into the sharp light of reality. In the foyer, I set my phone down on the entry table and pressed my palms flat against the cool wood, willing myself to stay steady. I was going to call my lawyer. I was going to freeze our joint accounts. I was going to find every document Ryan thought he could hide from me. And when it was done, when he was out of this house for good, I was going to reclaim what he tried to steal. I took one last, steadying breath. Then I picked up my phone and began making calls. The first call I made was to my lawyer, Ann Parker. She had handled my grandmother's estate after her passing, and I trusted her more than anyone else in my professional life. My voice shook as I explained what I'd overheard, what I'd recorded. Anne didn't waste time with sympathy. She was precise and focused, which was exactly what I needed. Emily, listen to me carefully, she said. You have the recording. You have the inheritance records and proof that the funds were separate property prior to marriage. Do you have access to the mortgage documents? I swallowed, my throat dry. Some. Ryan kept most of them in his office upstairs. Good. You need to get copies before he has a chance to destroy anything, she said. Do not confront him again. Do not let him know you're taking legal steps. If you can, call your bank right now and freeze any joint accounts. I'll start drafting an emergency motion to prevent him from transferring ownership. Her voice was a lifeline in the chaos. Okay, I whispered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. Okay, I'll do it now. We hung up. My heart was thudding as I climbed the stairs to Ryan's office, half expecting him to jump out and stop me. But when I cracked the door open, the room was empty. I forced myself to walk to the mahogany desk, the same desk where Ryan had once kissed my forehead and told me he'd always take care of me. My stomach twisted as I pulled open the top drawer. Inside was a stack of manila folders, some labeled refinance documents, others marked with my grandmother's last name, Cooper. My hands were shaking as I pulled them out and flipped through them. And there it was, photocopies of the quitclaim deed he'd been planning to file, transferring the property into his name alone. My signature was printed neatly on the bottom of the last page. But it wasn't my signature. The curve of the Y was all wrong. I took out my phone and snapped photos of every page. Then I gathered the files and carried them downstairs to the dining table. I could hear Ryan moving around in the kitchen, muttering to himself. At one point, I heard the clatter of glass breaking. I didn't care. I just kept photographing every scrap of evidence I could find. When I was done, I picked up the phone again. This time, I called the bank. The woman on the other end asked me a series of security questions before finally confirming my request to freeze our accounts. I felt a small, hard thrill of triumph when she said, "All joint funds have been temporarily locked pending investigation." It was the first time since I'd walked in on them that morning that I felt like I had control over something. When I hung up, the house was eerily quiet. I looked around, seeing everything with new eyes. The framed wedding photos on the mantel, the monogrammed towels in the bathroom, the expensive appliances Ryan insisted we needed. All of it felt tainted. I didn't flinch when Ryan finally emerged from the kitchen, his expression dark. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. I turned to face him, holding the stack of files against my chest like a shield. "I'm protecting myself," I said. His gaze dropped to the folders, then back to me. "You think you can just take those?" "They're mine," I replied calmly. "Everything you were trying to steal is mine. The inheritance, the house, the savings. You don't get to call it business when you're defrauding your own wife." He took a step closer. "Emily." "No," I cut him off, my voice cracking. "Don't say my name like you care about me. You don't. You care about money. You care about your image. You care about whatever sick little plan you and Lucia were cooking up, but you don't care about me." Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or the first spark of regret. I didn't care anymore. "You need to leave," I whispered. "Pack your things and go. My lawyer is filing an emergency injunction to keep you from touching anything else." His mouth twisted into a sneer. "You're going to regret this." I almost laughed. "No, I regret trusting you. That's the only thing I regret." I turned away from him and started collecting the rest of my things, my laptop, my purse, my keys. I felt like I was moving underwater, every step taking all the strength I had left. As I reached the door, Ryan called after me. "You'll be nothing without me," he said, his voice low and bitter. I paused with my hand on the knob. "No," I said, glancing back over my shoulder. "I was something long before you ever walked into my life, and I'll be something again, without you." I pulled the door open and stepped out into the cold morning air. For a second, I just stood on the front steps, breathing, feeling the sun on my face. And for the first time since I'd met Ryan, I felt free. I didn't go to the office that day. Instead, I drove straight to Anne's law firm, my heart hammering the whole way. The folders sat in the passenger seat like a loaded gun, proof that my marriage had been a lie and my husband was willing to steal everything I had. When I walked into Anne's office, she took one look at my face and wordlessly closed the door behind me. She gestured for me to sit, and I handed her the stack of documents. Her eyes moved quickly over each page. She was silent for a long moment before she finally looked up. "This is exactly what we need," she said. "You did the right thing by documenting everything." I pressed my palms against my knees to steady them. "Can we stop him from taking the house?" Yes. Her voice was firm. The inheritance was separate property. The only way he could have any claim is if you willingly signed the quitclaim deed. And you didn't. Your recording proves he intended to forge it. That's fraud. She pulled a legal pad toward her and began making notes. I'll file an emergency motion for injunctive relief this afternoon. That will prevent him from transferring or refinancing the property. We'll also notify the title company and your bank. He won't be able to touch any funds without triggering a fraud investigation. My throat tightened. Will he be arrested? That depends, she said carefully. If you want to press criminal charges, we can take this to the district attorney. But you should know it can be a long, draining process. You'd be testifying against him. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Ryan's face when he realized I'd caught him. The way he'd said, "You'll regret this." Like he still believed he had any power over me. I drew a slow breath. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. Anne nodded. Then I'll prepare both the civil and criminal filings. In the meantime, you need to stay somewhere safe. Don't go back to the house alone. I felt a pang of sadness that even my home, my grandmother's home in spirit, was no longer safe. But there was no time to grieve it yet. Anne made copies of everything, and I signed a flurry of papers, motions, declarations, notices to the title company. With every signature, I felt a little of my strength come back. When we finished, I stood up on unsteady legs. Where will you go? Anne asked gently. My sister's, I said. She's expecting me. Good, she said. I'll call you as soon as the judge issues the injunction. I thanked her and left. Outside, the sky was turning gray, the first hints of rain in the air. I didn't even have an umbrella. But I didn't care. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the clouds gather over the city. I felt like the person I'd been that morning, trusting, hopeful, proud, had been stripped away in a single day. And yet, underneath the numbness, there was a kernel of something fierce, determination maybe, the same determination that had made my grandmother build a life out of nothing and leave it to me so I'd never have to depend on anyone. I started the car and drove to my sister Lily's house. She lived across town in a modest place that smelled like fresh bread and lavender. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms. I know you don't want to talk yet, she murmured, but whenever you do, I'm here. I nodded, pressing my cheek against her shoulder. The tears I'd held back all morning finally spilled over. Later, I set my phone on her kitchen counter and replayed the recording. Ryan's voice, so calm and certain. Lucia's nervous replies, the cold finality of their plan. I sent the audio file to Anne and saved a backup on a secure drive. Then I scrolled through my messages until I found Ryan's last text. Love you, see you tonight. Sent just hours before I caught him planning to steal everything. My stomach turned, but I didn't look away. I needed to remember this feeling. I needed to remember exactly who he was. The next morning, Anne called to tell me the judge had signed the emergency injunction. Ryan was officially barred from transferring, refinancing, or selling the house. If he tried, he'd be in contempt of court. I almost laughed at the surge of relief. One small victory. One step toward reclaiming what was mine. That afternoon, my sister and I packed up my most important belongings, legal documents, family photos, the last letter my grandmother had ever written me. I left the rest behind, knowing I'd deal with it later. As we drove away, I looked back at the house, feeling a strange mix of grief and clarity. I wasn't the naive newlywed anymore. I was someone who had learned, in the hardest way possible, that love without honesty is just a lie in a prettier package. And I was done living in lies. Over the next 2 weeks, my life became a flurry of legal appointments, paperwork, and cautious steps toward freedom. Each morning, I'd wake in the small guest room at my sister's house, my body sore from stress, but my mind clearer than it had been in months. Anne filed the civil suit and referred my case to a prosecutor specializing in financial crimes. The district attorney's office reviewed my evidence: the recording, the forged signature, the bank statements showing Ryan's attempts to funnel funds out of our accounts. When they called to tell me they were moving forward with criminal charges, I felt something uncoil in my chest. Justice. Even if it would be slow, even if it would never make me whole, at least the truth was out in the open. Ryan tried to contact me, of course. He called, he texted. He even showed up at Lily's front door once, demanding to talk like adults. But Lily is 5'4" of pure steel when she needs to be, and she told him if he didn't leave, she'd call the police. He left, his car tires screeching as he pulled away. That was the last time I saw him in person. Lucia tried to reach out too. She sent an email saying she never meant to hurt me, that she'd been manipulated, that she was just desperate. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to Anne and blocked her address. Some nights I'd sit in Lily's kitchen, a mug of chamomile tea cooling in my hands, and ask myself the same question over and over. How did I not see it coming? How did I spend years with someone who could look me in the eye and plot behind my back? And every time I reminded myself that shame belongs to the liar, not the person who believed them. The day the criminal charges were formally filed, attempted fraud, forgery, conspiracy to defraud a spouse, I drove by the house. One last time. It was still mine, protected by the injunction, but I knew I'd never feel at home there again. I didn't even get out of the car. I just sat behind the wheel, watching the sunlight hit the front windows. This house was supposed to be a symbol of everything I'd built, but it had become something else, a monument to the cost of trusting the wrong person. I called Anne that afternoon and told her I wanted to put it on the market. "Are you sure?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't waver. "I want a clean start." Within a month, the house was sold. I took the proceeds, still safely protected as separate property, and put them into a trust under my name alone. The rest of the funds were frozen pending the outcome of the lawsuit. The day the sale closed, I drove back to Lily's and stood in her small backyard, feeling the first warm winds of summer brushing my hair from my face. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. That evening, I opened the last letter my grandmother had written to me. I'd saved it for when I needed her voice most. "My dearest Emily," it read. "Remember, a house is just walls and a roof. What matters is who you become inside it. If you ever feel you've lost your way, know you can always build again." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears running freely down my face. Ryan had tried to take everything from me: my home, my security, even my belief that love was real. But he hadn't taken the most important thing: my ability to start over. Months later, after the criminal case ended in a guilty plea and a conviction for fraud, I finally felt the last pieces of that old life crumble away. I signed the final divorce papers in Anne's office, my hands steady, my heart lighter than it had been in years. When I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sun was shining. I lifted my face to the warmth, letting it soak into my skin. I had lost a house, a marriage, and the future I thought I wanted. But I had gained something I hadn't known I'd needed: freedom. The knowledge that I was capable of protecting myself, and the unshakable certainty that I would never let anyone steal my story again.